Welcome, everyone, and thanks for listening to the Forgot to Save podcast, the twice-monthly gaming podcast where we go back and play the games we always wanted to, but never got a chance to with you, the listener. I'm Stone, and this week is finally the last of our solo episodes. We are going to be back in full force in November, but for this particular episode, we're going to be alone. And if you're not already listening on YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, you can find us on any of those sites. Now, we are talking about Life is Strange this month, and there is a lot to talk about, so let's jump right into it. So let me start out by saying that throughout the course of this podcast, we have gotten to play a lot of really, really great games, and I'm really happy we started doing this podcast because it helped me kind of spread my wings and play these games that, again, we've always wanted to, and we never got a chance to. But all of the awesome games that we played so far, Super Metroid, Titanfall 2, Shadow of Mordor, The Last of Us, honestly, I think this is the most important, most influential game that I personally have ever played, and I think that there is so much to talk about that even myself, just recapping this game, is not going to do it justice. There is so much to say about this game, and so much this game can teach people by playing. I don't have enough time to perfectly encapsulate it and really do it justice. So seriously, of all of the games that we've played, if you've ever been interested in any of them, if you can only choose one, I encourage any person to pick up Life is Strange. The first episode is absolutely free, and all the games we play are under $20 US. Please, 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 seriously consider Life is Strange. This game is phenomenal in so many ways, and although the definition of a masterpiece is something that is created after a specific talent has been completely mastered, I am honestly close to calling this game a masterpiece. There is so much right with it. The storytelling is so well crafted, but we're gonna get a lot more in depth here. So let's start with some of the basics. Why don't we? Okay, so first the house cleaning items. I was playing this on PC. I don't normally, but I did play this game with mouse and keyboard. I think the controls worked well enough with that I didn't necessarily have to use a controller. And I did play through the entirety of the game. I played all 5 episodes. I actually just beat episode 5 today because I found that experience in this game episodically, as though it were some kind of show, was actually working really well. I didn't like to sit down and play an episode and then immediately play another episode. Even though I was excited to do so, it kind of really built up the suspense and really heightened my enjoyment in taking the time, stopping, and then playing the next episode when I was like fresh and kind of emotionally ready to do so. So if you're going to play through it, I would definitely recommend trying it in that format. But if you're somebody that loves to rush through the game and wants to play it, as fast as possible, then yeah, you can immediately jump into the next episode and jump into the next episode without any wait time in between. So, as far as the controls go, I did also watch Shelby play in the last episode a little bit on Xbox, and it is just slightly different. When you make your choices with a controller, it corresponds to a button press, whereas with the PC, you have to click and drag your mouse. So, it didn't really happen to me, but I could definitely see choosing an option you didn't want based off having to click and drag the mouse and getting caught somewhere in the middle that you didn't want to be. So that is a very real possibility, but I don't really see it as too much of an obstacle unless you're just really impatient while playing the game. Either experience is going to be about the same. The gameplay is mostly moving around and then clicking the corresponding button. It's not a lot of fast-paced choices for the most part. So that's not really a huge obstacle. Now, a moment ago, when I called this game a masterpiece, I want to clarify that I was speaking in terms of the story, there are obviously flaws to this game. There's not a lot of really unique or in-depth gameplay. It is, for the most part, kind of a point-and-click game. There's nothing super revolutionary as far as the gameplay goes. So, the graphics, as I touched on last time, are not spectacular, but it very much comes into its own style. It is almost as though the game has like a layer of watercolor over it, and it uses a really... The color palette is... It's almost watercolor-esque. There's kind of just... It's a feeling of watercolor. I can't say like it uses this kind of palette, only warm colors or cold colors. I'm not sure what exactly about it makes it feel like it's almost a watercolor painting, but it does have that kind of like undefinable feature to the art style. And in the beginning, it bothered me just a little bit, but the more I got accustomed to it, the more I found I enjoyed it, because it really complemented the style of game it is, and the environment that's built around it always kind of reminds you that this in itself is a piece of art. It's not just a game. It has its own unique personality to it, and I feel like the colors used and the style of kind of a watercolor over it allows it to have its own unique personality. And you'll look at photographs within the game, and they will be almost paintings. You don't really ever see a photograph. You see something drawn out on a computer that is supposed to represent a photograph in the world, and you eventually start to take those in as nothing seems out of place to you. You see these and you're like, wow, that's really good, that's really bad, that's really terrible, and you're just accepting those as art that exists in this world, and it becomes like second nature to recognize that the same way you'd recognize a real photograph, which is really cool that they have the way of kind of drawing you into the world like that with something that is so clearly out of place in any other game, is so much a part of the world in this game. And I'm glad that I became accustomed to it, because I really feel like the art worked really well for this game. And if you are someone that didn't really appreciate it in the beginning, know that it does grow on you. The graphics to the end still weren't phenomenal. Like the character models, it's not going to win an award for, the graphics on the game, but it does still have enough of its personality that you can really forgive it. There are some weather patterns in the game that are represented just like dots of a paintbrush, and it really, again, complements the personality of the game. The game has its own personality told through the art style, and you come to really appreciate this game, or at least I did, and that's something I definitely give it high praise on. So at the same time the graphics aren't great, the graphics are also great. So it's really kind of hard to quantify in that respect. And as much as the graphics add personality to the game, there's a lot to be said for the music and sounds in the game. Now, for some of the sound effects, it was pretty obvious that they were kind of like public domain sound effects. If they weren't, they sounded a lot like it. Like there was one point in which I encountered an owl, and it was like the classic public domain owl sound you hear in everything ever. And that didn't necessarily take away from the game. I understand if they didn't put budget into re-recording sounds for an owl when there's perfectly good public domain sounds out there they could have used. That doesn't bug me. The sounds that I do really want to give them credit for, I thought that the voice acting was pretty good most of the time. There were some times where and this isn't necessarily just to do with the sounds, but some of the writing for some of the characters is really dated and really terrible. If there's one bad mark on the game as a whole, it's that some of the dialogue is just not good. It is, because I don't have a better word, cringy, and it really turns me off to some parts of the game. And I get that you're dealing with these characters that are teenagers that are in high school, and they're going to say some dumb stuff, and there are memes they still had to reference for whatever reason, but some of it is just terrible. And it doesn't remove me from the game, but I do roll my eyes a lot because there's even some stuff where I'm like, ugh, I feel bad having been a part of this interaction altogether. But where the sounds really do come through is actually a lot of the music. The atmosphere is really spectacular, and actually for a while I didn't know that they were using real licensed music until a particular scene where you sleep over at Chloe's house and you wake up and she turns on Bright Eyes, and I had recognized that song, and that caused me to really pay attention to the future music that was playing, and I did realize this is all real licensed music, so it's probably, it's not probably, it is what people this age will be listening to. I listened to Bright Eyes when I was this age, so that kind of added another layer, and it really helped speak to the personality of the overall game, because this game has a lot of personality. And much as the curriculum of this school is about art, I think this game also is presenting itself as a piece of art, and I think it presents itself well. But it was further reinforced that there was licensed music later in the game. When you're in Chloe's room again, you can choose what music to play, and it gives you the different bands that are available, and they are real legitimate bands that produce this music and have been available to purchase for so long now. So yeah, I thought that really added to it, because it's easy to take licensed music and be super corny. Like, you can play Eye of the Tiger whenever you need a montage or something silly like that and on the nose, but this is all really mellow acoustic music that even without the lyrics, it could have fit the tone of the game so well, but the lyrics that are in these songs speak so much to the kind of conflict and coming of age that they are dealing with in the game without being super pandering. And I think that's something that's really spectacular about it. I think anybody can really relate to the kind of music that's in the game, and I don't think you're going to find many complaints of the music that's available. In fact, I have just finished the game, and I cannot wait to play Before the Storm, which is kind of a prequel to this game that just released pretty recently. In fact, next week, episode 2 comes out. There's only going to be 3 episodes. If you get the deluxe version, there will be 4, and it details kind of Chloe's adventures before Max came back to Arcadia Bay. And I'm very excited to play through that, but evidently they have an entire mode where you can make your own mixtape with the different licensed music in the game. So it seems like a lot of people enjoyed that feature so much that they are continuing to do it in their new series, Before the Storm. So it's really exciting that they're continuing that direction. I think that's one thing that really, really worked well for the game, and I don't think you're going to find too many people that would disagree with me on that point. So that was pretty exciting. I think the great thing about this game is that every single thing the game does lends to its personality. Even that complaint I had where they're really cheesy, meme speak throughout parts of the game. And I will say that it's few and far between, but it feels like they really pile it in episode 1. And you kind of go through dips where you forget about it for a while, and then they say something really terrible, and it brings it back, and then you forget about it for a while, and then it comes back, and it's really terrible. So, you'll get over it. I did, and I'm super cynical, and I'm super picky, and I managed to get over it pretty quickly. But, I don't know, every now and then they'll make you roll your eyes. So, I don't know. I love the music and sound. Everything added to the atmosphere on top of the kind of painting of the world. And the people it's populated with are really seriously fantastic. As Captain had mentioned in the last episode, and I talked about briefly, a lot of the characters fall into like archetypes of the high school TV dramas that we see. The cheerleaders, the jocks, the nerds, all those archetypes are represented. And in the first episode, it seems like they are pretty well stereotyped, but there is the option for more depth in those characters. And I'm really happy to say that as the game went on and I continued to play it and interact with those characters, there was so much more depth added to them. And the choices I had made previously really, really did make a difference. There was a portion of the game, because when you make these different choices, there will be a butterfly that appears in the top left, and it plays kind of a tune to let you know this will have an effect on the future. And when you interact with some of the more minor characters, you don't get that butterfly in the corner, so you kind of think, okay, I just made that choice to make that choice. But later you will be having, like maybe in 2 episodes, you'll have another conversation with that character, and they'll reference one of the earlier conversations, or maybe just one small thing you said to them before and how it impacted them. And it really started to feel like these are real living characters with real living strengths and weaknesses and flaws and likes and dislikes, and you can play to those, you can discover those, you can add depth to those characters. So the archetypes that were originally put in place can be kind of reinforced or broken down or explored a lot more deeply, so that, and I think this is something that's important just in general, I'll speak to a little bit later, but just with real people, you can have your initial judgment of people, but until you go in and talk to them and find out more about them, you don't really see the depth or where they come from. And I think that's really another thing that's spectacular about this game and adds personality to it, is that the world is lived in by people with depth and personality. And I think that's another layer of just really spectacular gameplay and storytelling. And I think the characters are what tie those two aspects together really well. It makes it work so fluidly. The art that you see to the characters that you experience, and the voice acting is pretty well portrayed throughout most of them. The game flows really nicely, and it feels like one coherent package start to end. It's never really broken up, that one aspect of it is so jarring that it kind of overshadows the other ones. Okay, so this last part of the discussion here is where it's going to get a bit ranty. So if you don't want to hear me rant and rave about the game, let me hit you with the quick summary. This game is phenomenal, and I feel like it has a lot to teach people. At this age, it has a lot of really hard themes to deal with, and it handles them very, very professionally, and I can't stress enough how important this game is. I do legitimately believe this to be a milestone in gaming storytelling. It is a seriously superb game, and if you are on the fence about it, I can't recommend it enough. So I'll save you the next 10-15 minutes of me going off on it, but if you want to stick around, here it is. This game's story in the very beginning was just kind of a hook, You, after episode 1, learn that Max has these powers to control time, and then you get a little bit of a cliffhanger, and it pulls you in enough to want you to keep watching it. And it's hard to not continue to liken it to Donnie Darko because of those sci-fi elements and kind of the impending storm that's going to happen. But the amount of depth in this game really, it makes you feel like there's a lot more to the story than there is. And in the story, at the end of every episode, I didn't think it was a cheap thrill. I think kind of every episode has a twist at the end, but it was never unwelcome. They were all pretty unpredictable. They advanced the story in a way that was fulfilling, and I believe that they always held up the integrity of the character. No character really drastically changed from one episode to the next in a way that was not believable. And I really have a lot of praise for them in doing that. But some of the stuff I want to talk about more specifically is that this game, I think, is so incredibly important. And had I played this when I was a little bit younger, I genuinely believe that this could affect the way that I treat people. We see this game through Max Caulfield's eyes. We are getting her interactions with people. You are making all the choices, and you do have the ability to rewind time and make new choices and then kind of choose what is best by your definition. But no matter what you do, every choice has a consequence. Whether it be good or bad, you also don't see that immediately with every choice. So as much as you have these superpowers, you kind of learn toward the end of the game that you're still just a person. And there is even, scenes involving guns, and you have foresight of future events. And no matter what you do, really all you have at the end of the day is your words and what you can convey to people. And most all of the problems in this game are just solved by talking to people, to getting down to their level, understanding what is impacting their lives, what brought them to this moment, and solving it together with them, or allowing what you deem to be best to be the way to progress and pushing people out of the way. And I feel like a lot of people have taken the former, where they are trying to understand and solve together, as the way to play, because at the end of every episode you kind of get the global rankings, and you can see that more often than not people are choosing what would be widely considered as the right thing to do. To more often than not, they're helping. And it's really refreshing to see that in a game that I think so well represents us as human beings, that most people are taking the high road. Now, I'm sure it's fun to go back and do the bad thing and then ultimately make your decision between the good thing and the bad thing. But it's nice to see that people more often than not want to do what is right. And I feel like that's not just because as people we have an inherent goodness, which I would like to believe. But I really do think that everything this game handles as far as its different themes is portrayed so well that you almost would feel heartless as a person to ignore the struggles and the obstacles that every one of these characters are facing when you come to understand what they're actually dealing with. The cool thing about this game is, as much as in the beginning it wants to portray people as blanket evil, there is no real evil in the game more than you would see in real life. You learn that every single character has shades that every person in real life would have. Everybody has their own traumatic events that have happened in their life. Everyone has their own goals that they're trying to achieve. Everyone has their own personality. And once you take the time to understand those things, you can work with people and see that there aren't inherently bad people all around you. But, that's not necessarily a blanket rule. You can't make that generalization. There are some people that just have bad intentions out there, and you have to do your best to try to recognize that, just based off the way they present themselves. So it kind of, at the end of the day, really, I think, sums up us as humans really, really fantastically. We see the depth of all the people out there, and as much as in games we want to put them in black and white categories, it's not there. It's all gray, and I think that is so spectacular. And in the beginning, you are dealing with a lot of really unique themes, and not unique in that they're unique to this game. In that, for a video game, usually we just kind of have a story and hero and villain, and you go through it. But we're getting in depth with things like identity, memory, obviously. Going through puberty, the friendships you build with people or break with people, relationships, whether that be romantic relationships or otherwise, and dealing with hardships in those relationships, in romantic relationships, such as unfaithfulness, or in their friendships, such as, coming out of contact like Max did with Chloe, and then, trying to rejoin and seeing, do you mesh well with the people you've become? There's a heavy emphasis on bullying and cyberbullying. I think that's a really big deal. And I think throughout this, it's subtly trying to teach you empathy, which I think is so phenomenally important. There's a lot of problem resolution that goes along with that. It kind of shows you, people laying out their goals and setting realistic expectations as to achieving those goals, and people that kind of had their head in the clouds as dreamers, and what becomes of people, on each end of that spectrum. You will see a lot of idols in this game, having to deal with idols, what becomes of your heroes. For example, a recurring theme throughout the game is the Everyday Heroes photo contest that you have to enter, and seeing everyone's submissions for that. It really kind of keeps an eye out for what idols people have. Dealing with peer pressure is a big thing. The Vortex Club is, the big popular group, and people wanting to get into their parties, and dealing with drug and alcohol abuse at a young age is something that this game also deals with. Maintaining innocence, or even the loss of innocence, finding a sense of belonging. And I think those are just really, besides the drug and alcohol abuse, the more tame themes you would kind of expect to see in like a high school drama, but not really present in a lot of video games. And then there's a lot more difficult themes I think there are to deal with, and not necessarily as a player, although I think there are some really hard things to deal with in the game, but really doing it respectfully as a writer, and how these developers portrayed it, I think it is done, again, really respectfully. But, drug and alcohol abuse, again, having mental or physical handicaps, and those people around you are connected to you with mental or physical handicaps. There are themes of sexual abuse and rape in this. There are people dealing with grief, mourning, or loss, or even, depending on your choices, you could be doing the same. There are themes of both emotional and physical abuse in relationships, and otherwise, not necessarily romantic relationships. There are themes of poverty, of debt, of homelessness. There's, on the other side of the spectrum, there's privilege or social divisions. There is there are a few instances of sexism. There's kidnappings. There's gun violence. There's bribery and corruption. This game, I think, safely and respectfully encapsulates almost every real hard-hitting aspect of the human condition outside of maybe race and religion. And I think it does it so spectacularly that it's hard to not be aware of these issues, maybe even in your own community. And if you haven't necessarily dealt with them yourself, I think you're prepared to realize them when you see them after having just played this game. And I think that's something about this game that is so, so, so phenomenally important. It's hard for me to accurately stress, without sounding like I'm going down a checklist, how really, honestly important this game is to us. This is a piece of media that is released within the past decade that I think is so important for young people to experience. I think we have curriculums in schools that are, teaching Catcher in the Rye, which is kind of, it was made more for adults, and it's kind of dealing with, being out of place, finding your sense of belonging and identity. And I think that all the praise that gets, this game deserves tenfold. I honestly believe that this should be entered into a curriculum. If there are so many themes here that are really hard to swallow, that you have to personally deal with, because you are making the choices that affects those, and affects those around you dealing with these different real world issues, and in a way that I think is really, really respectfully done. And I think that all people can honestly and legitimately learn from playing this game. And it's so hard to think of games as an instrument of learning, but if, again, I honestly believe, had I played this at a younger age and been able to recognize all of these themes, I would be a different person now. I legitimately believe that. And I'm happy that playing this while I'm older, I was able to pick up on those consciously, and it kind of, eased my conscience a little bit that, I can recognize these. So if there's someone in need reaching out that is affected by something like this, I feel like this game has taught me, don't ignore that. And that is so, so phenomenally important. And I really encourage any young people who are on the fence about this game, just go for it. It's a super easy one to play. It's under $20, and I legitimately believe that knowing and understanding the different themes presented in this game can make you a better person. And I'm hoping, honestly, that when my nephew is old enough, I can encourage him to play this game. And I really think that this game, as far as its storytelling, is a milestone for gaming. I think this game needs to go down in the history of video game storytelling. This is one of the most important pieces of young adult media that we have seen in this past decade. This is the video game equivalent of coming of age books like Perks of Being a Wallflower that are written more for adults because there are real world adult problems that are affecting younger people that are in this high school or going into college age. And it's stuff that's hard to deal with, like sexual abuse, people being drugged and taken advantage of. I think it's so real, and that's something you need to understand. And I think this game does it so respectfully that there's not a lot of imagery portrayed in it. And I think if it were, it would be unnecessary. But the attitudes and activity that surrounds it and the fallout, there are, and I won't go into statistics or make this too morbid, but, it's no secret that at least in America, there are a lot of cases of sexual abuse and assault that are not properly dealt with from a legal standpoint. And I think this game really puts you in the perspective of someone that is dealing with that, with people you quote unquote know going through that. And you can see the frustration in dealing with it as a person with no real power. Because even though Max has the power to rewind time, she doesn't have the power to always stop these things from happening. She can't be everywhere at once. So I think, we're talking about in schools, the Catcher in the Rye book, the Catcher in the Rye book. We're talking about Catcher in the Rye and the Scarlet Letter, and a lot of these books meant for young adults that deal with really heavy consequences. And instead of talking about the Holden Caulfields, I think we need to be talking about the Max Caulfield that we see in Life is Strange, and how you really are not seeing a person do this or reading about a person doing this, but you are playing a game that means you are making the actions and are trying to help people through this, if not prevent it. But ultimately, I think what you learn in this game is, even with the power to rewind time, even to go back and try doing it again and again and again, there's only so much you can do and so much you can be responsible for. And it's so important to get it right the first time. It's so important to reach out to people, to understand people, to know what other people are going through, to help prevent something from happening to them. And ultimately, I feel like in this school, it becomes a community. You go through all of this with all the people around you, and you see so many people that just need somebody to reach out to them. And then when you do, obviously it's a game, so the reward is almost instant in that way. But I really feel like it could be translated to real life pretty easily. And I respect the heck out of this game. I really think it took on some really heavy themes, and it crushed it. I think it was done really respectfully, and I don't have enough praise. And I know I'm getting to the point where I'm just talking in circles around it, but I don't have the proper words to emphasize how important this game is. And I think that this game could be, the next Catcher in the Rye. And I know that there's even an homage to it, because you can see, I think it's in Max's room, there's a poster that very, very much recognizes Catcher in the Rye, but in their fictional universe. And the fact that Max's last name Caulfield, I think it is based off Holden Caulfield, and it presents the themes of insecurity, finding your identity, but then it goes steps and steps deeper. And yes, at the end of the day, it's a sci-fi game and you have superpowers. And I think that's another reason that people can discount it. But I encourage you, if you play through this game, really look for those deeper meanings, because it's not hard to find those. And I don't know, it teaches you as a person, it trains you to look out for those. And I think that in conversation, you start recognizing these key behaviors in conversations with these characters, and then maybe a light will go off for you in your head that says, oh my God, I've had this conversation with this person before, and I think they were demonstrating some of these behaviors. So I think this game is so phenomenally important, and the fact that we are not talking about this even today. I mean, this game, I think it's 2 years old now. I think it came out in 2015. Let me double check. Yes. This game came out in 2015. The fact that I have not heard about this game being talked about in this way already is pretty heartbreaking to me. This is, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, it's one of the most important pieces of young adult media that exists within the past decade. I can't stress that enough. I really think if you are open-minded enough to kind of take in the human condition and learn how you can be a better person through just playing video games, try episode 1 of Life is Strange. If you like it, keep going. The story is, very much a fictional sci-fi story, but the themes that it deals with are so phenomenally important. I loved every second of doing it. Even the really dark, really hard to deal with stuff, I enjoyed it. And without me continuing to go in circles, and now it's starting to rain pretty hard, so I'm going to wrap up this episode. But I really hope that if you guys play this game, you can find even a quarter of the meaning I've found out of it. It is so phenomenally important for gaming to have representation like this. I don't think I can, off the top of my head, think of another game as important or as impactful that exists, period, as this game. And if there are those games out there, then I look forward to playing them very much, because I genuinely believe this has been the most spectacular game I've ever played on this podcast, and one of the most spectacular stories I've ever experienced in a video game, period. That was a lot. And maybe it is a good thing Mike wasn't here, because I may have pretty much still said that same thing and not let him talk at all. But don't worry, I will not be alone in the next episode. If Mike won't be there, we will have a substitute, but I'm very much counting on Mike being back. He has been super busy, and even I myself have been super busy, and I'm sorry if there's been a delay in getting the episodes up or getting any responses out to you guys. But I am loving playing these games with you guys. Thank you, Captain Shelby, for your submissions in the last episode. I do not yet have the next game to announce for you guys, and I'm not going to speculate because more conversation needs to be done. So I'm sorry if it seems like we are ill-prepared for this month. There is a lot going on. Actually, if I can humble brag for a second here, I have returned to college, which is pretty fantastic, tooting my own horn there. So yes, it's gotten a little bit more busy, but I have not forgotten about this podcast. I love doing this podcast, and I love doing this podcast with Mike, and I know that he misses as much as I miss having him here. But we will be back to see you guys on November the 1st with a game yet to be determined. I look forward to playing that with you guys, and I hope that you are as stoked about playing this game, Life is Strange, as much as I was. Please, please, please genuinely consider going back and playing Life is Strange. I swear that I have not been paid in any way by anyone to recommend this game to you. I have just loved the experience so much. I only want to share it with other people. So, as always, this has been the Forgot to Save podcast. I have been Stone, and I cannot thank you guys enough for your contribution to this podcast and making it so great. We will be back November 1st, and I cannot wait to see what we will be playing with you guys then. Thank you.